My name is Clara. I am a partner at one of the city's leading architectural firms. I spend my days designing legacies in steel and glass, creating structures meant to stand for a century, monuments to function and beauty. But in the private architecture of my own family, I was never the designer. I was never even considered a resident with rights. I was simply the foundation, the unseen, unpraised concrete slab upon which their comfortable lives were built. To my parents and my younger sister, Chloe, I was not the architect of my own life, I was just their bank. A bank with no business hours, no withdrawal limits, and no expectation of ever being paid back. My primary, designated account holder, the one who made the most frequent and flagrant withdrawals, was always Chloe. From the moment she was born, 12 years after me, it was as if the sun had risen in our home for the first time, and I was instantly cast into a permanent, chilly shadow. My achievements were practical, expected, her very existence was a celebration. This dynamic, set in the bedrock of our childhood, would come to define the next 3 decades of my life, costing me more than I could have ever imagined, culminating in a single, obscenely expensive party that would finally force me to condemn the entire toxic structure. The pattern of financial and emotional exploitation wasn't a sudden storm, it was a slow, creeping erosion. It started small. When I landed my first internship, my first paycheck went not to a celebratory dinner for myself, but to the down payment on Chloe's first pony. I was 16. She was 4. My parents beamed, praising my generosity, telling me what a wonderful sister I was. The warmth of that praise was intoxicating, a drug I would chase for the next 20 years. When I graduated from university, the ink barely dry on my architecture degree, my graduation gift to myself was paying off my student loans. My graduation gift to Chloe was a brand new convertible because, as my mother explained, she needs something reliable to get to her classes, darling. You understand. You're the responsible one. Chloe wasn't even in college yet. When she finally did enroll, I was the one paying the tuition. She dropped out after 2 semesters, complaining the professors were uninspired. The tuition money was never mentioned again. It simply vanished into the ether of Chloe's whims, another line item in a ledger I was only just beginning to keep in my head. I remember one specific birthday, when the blueprint of our family was laid bare for anyone to see. It was my 12th birthday. I had been begging for a professional drafting set for months, obsessed with lines and angles even then. I unwrapped my gift from my parents to find a set of encyclopedias. An investment in your future, my father had said with a perfunctory pat on my head. A week later, for Chloe's 2nd birthday, the house was filled with balloons. Her gift was a ridiculously elaborate, custom-built dollhouse, a perfect miniature Victorian mansion that cost more than my father's monthly salary. I watched as he and my mother cooed over her shrieks of delight, their faces alight with a kind of adoration I had never received. Later that night, I found my father in his study, staring at the bill for the dollhouse with a worried frown. He looked up and saw me. "Don't you worry," he said, his voice strained. "Your sister deserves the world. And one day, you'll be successful enough to help us give it to her." He wasn't encouraging my dream, he was assigning me my role. I wasn't to be the artist, I was to be the patron. And the sole beneficiary of that patronage would be Chloe. This sense of obligation was tied to another, much larger legacy, my grandparents' estate. It was a beautiful, but crumbling country home, a place of genuine happy memories from my early childhood, before Chloe. My grandparents were the ones who saw the spark in me, who gave me my first sketchbook and pencils, who praised my clumsy drawings of fantastical buildings. When they passed, they left the house to my parents. It was their one great asset, and their one great burden. The roof leaked, the foundation was cracking, and the plumbing was a relic from a forgotten era. Their dream, the one they spoke of constantly, was to restore it to its former glory. It was the unspoken carrot dangled before me for years. Every time I paid for one of Chloe's failed business ventures, the Etsy jewelry shop, the lifestyle blog, the organic dog biscuit bakery, it was with the implicit understanding that I was banking goodwill. One day, if I was good enough, generous enough, I would be allowed to pour my money and my actual, professional talent into the restoration of the family home. It was the ultimate prize. A project that would finally merge my two identities, the architect and the daughter, and earn me the love that had always felt so conditional. By my 38th birthday, I'd started a spreadsheet. I called it the Bank of Clara. It wasn't a joke anymore. It was a testament to my own foolishness. The tuition fees, the cars, the apartment rentals, the designer clothes, the 5-star vacations for them while I worked weekends. The total was nauseating. It had climbed past $1 million. And it was about to get $100,000 worse. Chloe was turning 25, and my parents decided it was time for a party that would, in their words, launch her into the society she was born for, a party I, of course, was expected to fund. And like a fool, I agreed. I told myself this would be the last time. This grand gesture would be enough. Finally, they would see all I had done. They would be grateful. And then, we could finally talk about the house. The planning for Chloe's party was a masterclass in everything that was wrong with our family. It was my money, but it was their fantasy. My mother and Chloe took the $100,000 budget not as a ceiling, but as a suggested opening bid. They hired a high-end event planner, who spoke in hushed, reverent tones about things like tablescapes and experimental moments. I, an actual architect, offered to help with the spatial design of the rented ballroom, suggesting an elegant, modern layout that would enhance the venue's historic features. My ideas were dismissed with a wave of Chloe's hand. "Oh, Clara, that's so sterile," she'd sighed, scrolling through Pinterest. "It's a party, not a corporate office lobby. We want glamour." Glamour, it turned out, meant a champagne fountain, a 10-foot-tall ice sculpture of a swan, and a flower wall that cost more than my first car. Every invoice, every deposit, was forwarded to my email with a brief, demanding note from my mother. "Pay this by Friday, darling." There was never a please, never a thank you. It was transactional. I was the service provider for the Chloe experience. The whole ordeal dredged up a memory I had long tried to suppress. My university graduation. I had graduated summa cum laude, the top of my class, the recipient of the Dean's Medal for Architectural Excellence. It was the proudest moment of my young life. My parents were there, sitting in the third row. But they weren't watching me walk across the stage. They were on the phone, their faces etched with concern. I found out later that Chloe, then a dramatic 16-year-old, had gotten into a fender bender in the very convertible I had bought her. It was a minor scratch, but she had called them in a hysterical panic. My moment of supreme academic achievement, the culmination of 5 years of grueling, relentless work, was nothing more than background noise to my sister's latest trivial drama. I remember standing on the lawn afterwards, my medal feeling heavy and pointless in my hand, my cap askew, as my mother patted my arm absently. "That's lovely, dear," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Now, we have to go. Chloe is very upset." My success was only ever real to them when it manifested as a solution to one of their problems, a problem usually created by Chloe. On the day of the party, a deep, weary dread had settled in my bones. I'd spent 12 hours at the office navigating a crisis with a multi-million-dollar construction project, placating contractors, and redrawing schematics on the fly. I didn't have time to go home and change. I drove straight from the downtown construction site to the opulent suburban country club. I walked in wearing my work attire, tailored black trousers, a silk blouse, and practical, expensive leather flats. My hair was pulled back in a simple, severe bun. I was neat, professional, and completely out of place. The scene before me was staggering. The ballroom glittered under the light of a dozen crystal chandeliers. A string quartet was playing Vivaldi. Waiters in white tuxedos moved through the throng with silver trays of champagne and canapés. It was a tableau of obscene wealth, a monument to my sister's unearned status, built with my money. I saw my mother across the room, resplendent in a sequined gown, laughing with some woman who looked like her face had been starched. I saw my father by the bar, holding a glass of scotch, looking smugly satisfied. I felt a familiar pang of invisibility. I was the ghost at their feast. I decided to try. For the millionth time, I decided to try. I squeezed through the crowd, my simple clothes feeling like a pauper's rags amidst the silks and jewels. I found Chloe holding court in the center of the room, a vision in a custom-made silver dress that shimmered like a fish's scales. She was surrounded by a gaggle of equally glamorous, vapid-looking friends, all hanging on her every word as she bragged about the rare vintage of the champagne. "Chloe," I said, touching her arm lightly. It's quite a party." "Happy birthday," she turned, her eyes flicking over my outfit with open disdain. Her perfectly glossed lips curled into a sneer. "Oh, it's you," she said, her voice loud enough for her friends to hear. Before I could say another word, before I could even mention the frantic call I'd received from the caterer about the final payment being declined because my mother had maxed out the event credit card on a new handbag, she leaned in. "Can't you see I'm busy entertaining my guests?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "God, you look like you just crawled out from under a rock. Why don't you go find the open bar or something and try to blend in? Don't just stand here in the middle of everything like a beggar waiting for a handout." Beggar. The word struck me with the force of a physical blow. It echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of my mind. Beggar? Me? The one who had paid for the dress on her back, the champagne in her glass, the very air she was breathing in this ridiculous, gilded room. In that one, exquisitely cruel moment, the entire flimsy structure of our family dynamic didn't just crack, it was utterly demolished. The years of quiet hope, of dutiful sacrifice, of waiting to be seen, all turned to dust. She didn't see me as her sister. She didn't even see me as a bank. She saw me as nothing. An inconvenience. A peasant at the Queen's ball. I looked at her face, twisted with casual cruelty, and I felt nothing. Not hurt. Not sadness. Just a profound, chilling clarity. Without a single word, I turned around and walked out of the ballroom. No one tried to stop me. No one even noticed I was gone. The drive home was a silent film of streetlights and shadows. The radio was off. My phone was off. The only sound was the low hum of the engine and the deafening roar of 15 years of resentment finally breaking free in my mind. The word beggar replayed itself on a loop, each repetition chipping away another piece of the deluded girl who thought love could be earned through sacrifice. With every mile that separated me from that party, the grief that should have been there was cauterized by a cold, clarifying rage. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of a tantrum, it was the focused, quiet fury of a demolition expert about to bring down a condemned building. I saw it all with perfect, brutal clarity: the pony, the convertible, the tuition, the apartments, the endless stream of cash flowing from my life into theirs, a one-way river with no end. I saw my father's feigned pride and my mother's manipulative praise for what they were, tools to keep the quarry from bolting. I arrived at my apartment, a minimalist space that now felt less like a home, and more like a sterile waiting room for a life I had yet to live. I didn't pour a drink. I didn't cry. I walked to my home office, sat in my chair, and opened my laptop. The time for emotion was over. It was time for action. My fingers moved with a surgeon's precision. This was an amputation, a severing of gangrenous limbs to save the whole. First, the shared credit card, the one my mother used for emergencies that always seemed to coincide with shoe sales. I logged into the bank portal. A few clicks. Cancelled. A small window popped up. Are you sure you want to permanently close this account? I clicked yes with a sense of profound relief. Next, the joint savings account my father had insisted we open together years ago. For the house restoration fund, he had said. It was my money, of course, a monthly auto deposit from my salary that I never touched. I initiated a transfer of the entire balance back to my personal checking account. Then, I removed myself from the account, erasing my name from its digital record. Then came Chloe. I pulled up the lease agreement for her trendy downtown loft, the one I had co-signed and paid for every month for 2 years. I drafted a crisp, professional email to the property management company. It stated, clearly and without emotion, that as of the end of the current rental period, 30 days from now, I would be terminating my role as financial guarantor, and would no longer be responsible for the rent. I attached a copy of the termination clause from the lease. Sent. Finally, the purge. I opened my phone's contacts. My mother. My father. Chloe. Aunts, uncles, cousins who had been complicit, always calling with a sycophantic preamble before asking for a little loan for Chloe. Block. 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 A digital firewall against a lifetime of toxicity. As I worked, another memory surfaced, one I had clung to like a life raft. A few years ago, I had spent a weekend drafting a full set of preliminary architectural plans for the restoration of the family estate. I'd presented them to my father. He'd looked over the detailed drawings, the careful renderings of what could be. He had looked at me, and for a fleeting second, I saw what I thought was genuine awe in his eyes. "You have a real gift, Clara," he'd said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. A real gift. I had replayed those words in my mind thousands of times, proof that he saw me, the real me, the creator. Now, sitting in the cold glow of my monitor, I saw the truth. He wasn't admiring my soul. He was admiring his asset. He was a man appraising a prize horse, marveling at the strength that would one day pull his carriage. The gift was not the talent itself, but its potential utility to him. The realization didn't even hurt anymore. It was just another fact, another data point in a long equation of exploitation. The next morning, I called Marcus, my business partner and the closest thing I had to a true confidant. I met him at a small cafe and laid out the entire story, from the party to the digital amputation I had performed the night before. He listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he didn't say, "I told you so," though he had every right. He simply reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "Good," he said, his voice firm. "I am proud of you." That took immense courage. Now, the real work begins. Building your own legacy. For the first time in 24 hours, I felt a crack in my icy composure. His unwavering, unconditional support was so foreign, so powerful, it almost broke me. But I held it together. I knew this wasn't the end. They would not go quietly. They would need a formal declaration of independence. That weekend, I prepared my final dispatch. I printed the spreadsheet, the Bank of Clara, all 30 pages of it. The final tally at the bottom, in bold red font, was $1, 214, 78234. I wrote a single-page letter, dispassionate and direct. It stated my decision to cease all financial support was permanent and effective immediately, citing the cumulative effect of years of financial and emotional exploitation, which had been irrevocably crystallized by the events at the party. I didn't accuse. I didn't emote. I just stated facts. I sealed the letter and the summary page of the spreadsheet in a large manila envelope and sent it via registered mail. The war was over. The battle was about to begin. The silence lasted for exactly 72 hours, the time it took for the registered letter to arrive and for the first of the declined payments to register. Then, the storm broke. It began as a digital siege. A flood of emails, first from my mother, then my father, then Chloe. They bypassed my blocked numbers, their words escalating from confused, to pleading, to demanding, to outright abusive. When their emails went unanswered, they escalated to showing up at my office. My loyal receptionist, a formidable woman named Helen whom I had already briefed, handled them with icy professionalism. "I'm sorry, Ms. Vance is in a meeting," she would say, her smile never reaching her eyes. Her schedule is fully booked for the foreseeable future. They tried for 3 days straight, their frustration mounting with each polite dismissal. Finally, they laid an ambush. I came home late one evening to find them waiting for me in the lobby of my apartment building. My mother, my father, and Chloe, a united front of entitlement and fury. My mother rushed forward, her face a mask of theatrical distress. "Clara. Thank God. We've been so worried. How could you do this to us? How could you just cut us off? After everything we've done for you. We are your family." Her voice was shrill, designed for the consumption of any neighbors who might be listening. My father stepped forward next, his approach one of paternal disappointment, as if scolding a petulant child. "This has gone far enough, Clara," he said, his voice low and menacing. "This little tantrum of yours is absurd. You are an adult. It's time to stop this drama, turn the credit card back on, and unfreeze the house account. The mortgage is due at the end of the week." He spoke as if my compliance was a foregone conclusion, as if my actions were a temporary software glitch that just needed a firm reboot. Then came Chloe. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of rage and genuine panic. The silver dress was gone, replaced by a scowl. "My landlord sent me an eviction notice," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Because of you. You're trying to ruin my life. You've always been jealous of me, haven't you? You have all this money and success, and you can't stand to see me happy." I stood there, my briefcase in my hand, and let their wave of accusations wash over me. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I waited until they had exhausted their initial volley, until they were just standing there, breathing heavily in the quiet, sterile lobby. Then, I spoke. My voice was calm, level, and devoid of the emotion they were so desperately trying to provoke. "There is nothing to discuss," I said, looking each of them in the eye. "My decision is final. The document I sent you outlines my reasons and provides a detailed financial summary of the past 15 years. This isn't about a tantrum, Dad. This is a business decision. The Bank of Clara is officially insolvent and has closed its doors." I turned my gaze to Chloe. "You called me a beggar, Chloe. You stood in a room that I paid for, wearing a dress I paid for, drinking champagne I paid for, and you called me a beggar. The irony is not lost on me. You, all of you, are adults. It is time you learned to support yourselves." Their faces registered shock, then disbelief. They were prepared for tears, for arguments, for a dramatic scene. They were not prepared for this cold, final balance sheet. They were speechless. I walked past them, my footsteps echoing on the marble floor, and pressed the button for the elevator. As the polished steel doors slid shut, the last thing I saw was the reflection of their 3 stunned faces, mouths agape, suddenly realizing their primary source of funding had just been permanently liquidated. The immediate fallout was a smear campaign of epic proportions. My phone, which I had since unblocked for a select few, began to light up with calls from extended family. Aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly deeply concerned for my mental well-being. The narrative my parents were spinning was that I'd had some sort of breakdown, that the pressures of my job had made me cruel and unstable, and that I had abandoned my loving family in their time of need. It was a masterful piece of revisionist history. For a moment, a sliver of doubt crept in. Was I the villain? Was I being too harsh? The years of conditioning, of being the responsible one, were a powerful force. Then, A call came from a number I didn't recognize. It was my cousin Leo. He was younger than me, a quiet, observant soul who had always existed on the periphery of the family drama. "Clara," he said, his voice hesitant. "It's Leo. Listen, Aunt Carol just called me, told me this insane story. I wanted to call you directly." He took a deep breath. "I'm so sorry, Clara. For everything. I always saw it. I saw how they treated you, how they used you. I saw it at every Christmas, every birthday. I was a coward for never saying anything, and I'm sorry for that. But what you did. What I'm hearing you did. It was the bravest thing I've ever seen. Don't let them get to you. Don't you dare doubt yourself for a second." Hearing those words from someone inside the blast zone, someone from the family, was like a load-bearing wall being erected inside my soul. It solidified my resolve. His validation was worth more than 1,000 of their accusations. In the months that followed, I began the slow, deliberate process of architectural salvage on my own life. I sold the large, sterile apartment that had always felt more like a corporate suite, and bought a smaller, sun-drenched condo in a vibrant neighborhood, with a balcony big enough for a small garden. I filled it with art that I loved, books I wanted to read, and the comfortable silence of a space that was truly my own. I took my first real vacation in over a decade, a 2-week trip to Italy with Marcus, where we explored ancient ruins and ate pasta without once checking our work emails. I began building a chosen family, reconnecting with old university friends I'd let drift away, because I was always too busy or too emotionally drained from dealing with my biological one. We had long, lazy dinners where we talked about ideas and dreams, not debts and obligations. The most significant project I undertook, however, was a personal one. I used a portion of the money I was no longer hemorrhaging to establish a small foundation. Its first initiative was to design and fund the construction of a community arts center for underprivileged youth in the city, providing free workshops in everything from painting to digital design. It was a way to use my resources and my skills to build something positive, to nurture sparks in young people the way my grandparents had once nurtured mine. I named it the Eleanor Vance Center, after my grandmother. It was my way of reclaiming my own legacy, untangling it from the toxicity of my parents. One evening, while reviewing the final blueprints for the center, a memory floated up, clear and bright. I was a little girl, no older than 7, sitting on the porch of the old country estate with my grandfather. It was a warm summer day. He had given me my first real drafting kit, and I was meticulously drawing a cross-section of an imaginary castle with dozens of secret passageways. He watched me for a long time, not with the appraising eye of my father, but with genuine, quiet delight. "You see the bones of things, Clarabelle," he'd said, ruffling my hair. "That's a gift. Don't ever let anyone tell you what to build." That memory, so pure and untainted, settled something deep within me. The foundation of my passion was solid, it was the structure built upon it that had been corrupt. News of my biological family trickled back to me occasionally through Leo. Chloe, unable to afford her loft or her lifestyle, had been forced to get a job as a barista. She had eventually been evicted and had to move back into the crumbling family estate with my parents. My father had been forced to take out a high-interest second mortgage on the house just to cover their basic expenses. The grand restoration would never happen. They were trapped together in the monument to their own greed and neglect, its leaky roof and cracked foundation a perfect metaphor for the family they had built. About a year after the party, the ultimate irony occurred. A distant great-aunt, a woman I barely knew, but who had apparently followed my professional career and my new philanthropic work in alumni newsletters, passed away. She left me the entirety of her considerable estate. Her letter, written by her lawyer, stated she wanted to leave her legacy to a woman who builds legacies for others, not for herself. I used the inheritance to expand the community center, ensuring its future for decades to come. The family that saw me as nothing but a wallet received nothing. The daughter who had walked away was rewarded for the very character they had tried to exploit. The dedication ceremony for the Eleanor Vance Center was on a perfect autumn afternoon. The sun glinted off the new glass facade of the building I had designed. The air was filled with the sounds of a student jazz band and the excited chatter of children. Marcus was by my side, his hand resting on the small of my back. Leo was there, too, with his wife, smiling proudly. My chosen family, my real family, was all around me. When I stepped up to the podium to speak, I looked out at the crowd, at the hopeful faces of the kids who would learn and create within these walls, and I felt a sense of peace that was so profound, it was almost overwhelming. I spoke about the importance of strong foundations, not just in buildings, but in lives. I talked about building on principles of respect, integrity, and mutual support, and about the courage it takes to tear down a structure when you discover its foundations are rotten. I was no longer a provider, a bank, or a beggar. I was an architect. I was the architect of my own life, and I was finally building something beautiful, something that would last. Clara's story is a dramatic and painful illustration of what can happen when family love is twisted into financial and emotional obligation. She spent years trying to earn affection that was never truly available to her, mistaking her designated role as a provider for a genuine place in her family. Her journey from quiet endurance to decisive action shows the incredible strength it takes to set boundaries, especially with those who are supposed to care for you the most. By quantifying the abuse, creating an undeniable record of the exploitation, she armed herself with the truth and was able to withstand the inevitable gaslighting and manipulation that followed her decision. Her story is a powerful reminder that self-worth cannot be granted by others, it must be built, sometimes on the ruins of what we once held dear. We see that true legacy isn't about maintaining broken-down structures out of a misguided sense of duty, but about having the courage to build new, healthy ones in their place. What do you think? Was Clara's complete cutoff the only solution, or was there another way? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your generosity was treated as an entitlement? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.